Anyway, a lot of great talks today, and really amazing ideas. As mentioned, I'm Marc Yaggi. I'm the CEO of Waterkeeper Alliance. If you missed our panel yesterday, short brand story, we are a global NGO that unites more than 300 locally based clean water advocacy NGOs, and we focus citizen action, science, and law on issues that affect our waterways, from pollution to climate change. And what I like about being here is that so many different sustainable innovators coming up with ideas to figure out how we can exist in more harmony. And I get to play in that space sometimes with different projects, but I also spend a bulk of my time trying to help community-based leaders deal with current and future threats to their waterway, to their community, and ultimately to the planet, typically from fossil fuel industry, other industries, and pollution. But I see a lot of symbiotic relationship between both of those things, because you've got the local leaders that are there staving off, trying to push off the fossil fuels and being like, come on, sustainability innovators, let's get in here, we got to get this in. So I like to see them both come together, and it's great. What I have today, I'm going to shorten this up too, because I know we're late on time, is a sustainable investment, but it's just a different kind. We want to invest in local leadership and the partners that are needed to make it happen, invest in local action, and the return is a little bit different. The return is keeping fossil fuels in the ground. And I'm going to skip over talking about the importance of keeping fossil fuels in the ground, because I think that probably the audience understands that. So we know we need to keep fossil fuels in the ground, and in my daily work, it's focusing on, as I said, working on boosting up these local leaders that are trying to keep fossil fuels in the ground. And so I want to tell a little bit of a story about the importance of the power of local leadership and the power of having like a network behind it that supports it. So in 2005, when I first started working at Waterkeeper Alliance, my boss at the time asked me if I wanted to go to Senegal. He said, there's a group that wants to start a Waterkeeper there. And I said, sure, I'll go to Senegal. And so I headed over there, and I went to a place called Han Village, which is on Han Bay. It's outside the capital city of Dakar. It's a village of 40,000 people, no sanitation service, myriad diseases because of it. And 25 years before I went there, it was an artisanal fishing village, and they used to draw their bounty from the sea. But over time, leading up to when I got there, pollution got so bad that you could no longer fish in the bay. So the fishermen would have to go out to the open ocean. It would take them away from their families for long periods of time. It would cost them more money, and it was dangerous because they were in these little wooden pirogues out in the middle of the open ocean. Some of them lost their lives. And so this village is broken up. It was broken up by football clubs. And that's how they competed with each other. And this one football club was called ASC Iraq. And ASC Iraq was very involved in social justice issues in the community. They taught about hygiene, HIV/AIDS, all sorts of different issues. And they really wanted to figure out how to restore the bay to its former grandeur so that people could swim in it again, so they could fish in it again. But they weren't having any success. One of the villagers moved to Toronto, Canada, and he learned about the work our Lake Ontario Waterkeeper was doing to defend and protect Lake Ontario and to restore it. He learned about some of the other groups in Canada. And so the next time he saw the villagers at ASC Iraq in Han Village, he said, maybe you want to start a Waterkeeper. Maybe that's our answer. Maybe we should do that. So that's how I ended up in Han Village. Now I got there, and it was, for the most part, prior to that in my career, I'd been used to seeing water pollution in the U.S. Subsequently, I've been to many places. This is still probably the #1 most polluted place I've been to. There's a few others in Nairobi and other spots that are up there. But if I'm looking all out, you're all in the bay. And if I'm looking out at the bay, to my right is a 30-foot wide canal, cement canal, open air of raw sewage coming from the capital city of Dakar. It's going right next to the villagers' homes. It's going through the fish market into the bay. Underneath me is a pipe coming from a Libyan-owned petroleum facility that's discharging petrochemicals directly into the bay, under the village chief's house, by the way. To my left is a pipe discharging a brown noxious liquid from a meat rendering plant. And of course, all along the beach, because there's no sanitation service, is all the household waste, because everybody's picking it up in their village huts, taking it down, dumping it onto the beach. The whole thing was a disgusting mess. And I had spent several days there, and I was with their leader, a guy named Mbeke. And I said to Mbeke, after several days, we sat down, and I said, listen, Mbeke, I'm really not sure how we're going to be able to add value, because at this point in time, we didn't have any of our Waterkeeper groups in the whole continent of Africa. I didn't have anybody on staff that spoke Wolof or French. And I said, I'm just really not sure how we're going to be able to add value to you on this. I feel terribly about what you're facing, but I don't know how we're going to add value to it. And Mbeke said, he said to me, well, first you've got an international brand that's going to bring us credibility. And then he said, I'm going to learn how to speak English. And then he said, I'm going to come to all of your strategy summits and your conferences, and I'm going to learn from all the veterans that have faced these issues in their waterways around the world, and I'm going to bring those strategies back, and I'm going to deploy them in my community. And so we decided, he made a persuasive argument, so we decided to jump ahead. We started Bahakeeper in early 2006. Fast forward, Mbeke learned English. And Mbeke would always, you'd see him at every one of our conferences, all of our strategy sessions, just being with people all the time, learning constantly, all day long. And then in around 2009, we helped him get a donation that he used to turn his office, the ASC Iraq Bahakeeper office in Han Village, into an internet cafe, because there's no internet service in the village. And that did three really good things. One is it made their office the focal point of the village. So it gave them an opportunity to educate people about they deserve a clean bay and the ways that they can try to get it. It gave them a voice to the outside world, and it gave them a sustainable source of revenue. Fast forward again, 2014, Mbeke's continuing, moving on, always showing up at these events. 2014, I remember it clearly because I was in Nepal. I was working on the Bagmati River with some local Nepalese groups there in Kathmandu. Came back to my hotel at the end of the night and found an article, was forwarded a story about how Bahakeeper had been successful in securing from the government of Senegal and European institutions $68 million cleanup of Han Bay. And then that $68 million cleanup has now turned into $130 million cleanup. They are cleaning all of the sewage waste. They've installed sanitation service. It's now gone wider than Han Village. It's impacting 17 villages and towns. 500,000 Senegalese are going to be impacted by it. It's the largest clean water project in the history of Senegal. And this all came from a football club in this little village that had no sanitation service, that had a vision for cleaning up their bay. Still inspires me to today. Why am I telling you the story about that? It doesn't have to do necessarily with fossil fuels. Well, despite all of it does in some ways. Despite all of the success they're having in this classic David versus Goliath battle, they're now facing an even bigger battle, that offshore drilling for oil and gas off the coast of Senegal. And it's a big one too. It brings in BP, Total, Woodside Energy, a couple state production facilities. They want to go into production on a couple blocks and then at the end of next year potentially, and we're talking about big amounts. They're estimating 1 billion barrels of oil and 1 trillion cubic feet of gas. Of course, we've already established we don't need to talk about why we need to keep fossil fuels in the ground. And so we'll skip over the climate impacts because we know what those are. Another impact that we've got to think about is a huge resource for Senegal, and that's their fisheries. We've got the fisheries in Senegal provide jobs for 17% of the working population, provides 40% of the protein for the country, and a majority of the processing is done in an artisanal fashion, predominantly by women. All of that's under threat. It's important to the EU, it's important to Europe as well, because Europe has had for decades, fisheries agreements with Senegal to access the fisheries in Senegal, including an EU agreement with Senegal in this past year, which would give them access to the fisheries, as well as an opportunity to create sustainable fishing practices there. But I know that after spending almost a month in the Gulf of Mexico in 2010 after the BP disaster, how it impacts when there's a spill like that, how it impacts the women and men who fish and all the businesses that rely on it. You close off the fisheries, you see the demand plummet. Nobody wants to eat Gulf fish. Even today, when some people are at a restaurant and they see Gulf shrimp, they're like, I'm not sure yet. It's been 12 years, but I'm not sure. So this is an impact that we've got to be concerned about. And it's not just that, the BP thing in the Gulf of Mexico I experienced isn't unique. 1978, Amoco spill in France. 1979, Ishtak spill in Mexico. We don't have to go through every year. 1989, Exxon Valdez in Alaska. 2005 to 2019 in the United States, we estimate we've had 2 spills per day of oil offshore. And from 2002 to 2012, satellite data is now showing that on West Africa, where Senegal is, but in the Gulf of Guinea, there's been more oil spilled during that decade than all of the BP oil disaster. So it's not a question of if it's going to happen. It is going to happen in Senegal. If they do drill, they're going to spill. And so we've got to work on protecting, supporting those local leaders. There's a pathway forward, because we're doing it in the Bahamas right now. In the Bahamas, there have been proposals for drilling. There were licenses issued. We created a strong and diverse coalition called Our Islands, Our Future. And Our Islands, Our Future was made up of Bahamian NGOs, Bahamian local businesses, and then international organizations like mine and some of our partners. And our goal ultimately is to get a permanent ban on offshore drilling in the Bahamas. We're not quite there yet, but so far we've got the license holders' permit renewal denied. We've got more government transparency under their new Freedom of Information law. We've been able to somehow secure increased government rhetoric against offshore drilling. And we've increased public discourse about offshore drilling and the threats and getting the community more engaged. So the next step forward in the Bahamas is going to be working to get a moratorium introduced. So that will send a signal to potential drillers that they're not going to be looking at licenses. And ultimately after that, a permanent ban by an act of parliament, so that it's not so easy to just reverse an administrative moratorium. We got to be able to take that and transfer that over to Senegal. Right now we have a strong and diverse coalition in Senegal as well, to Save Our Coasts and Fisheries. It includes a number of our groups in Senegal, other NGOs in Senegal. They're working on getting businesses involved. And we've got ourselves, 2 European fossil fuel finance groups involved, and a couple international legal organizations involved. So we're going to take that same playbook to Senegal. And I know we're running out of time, so I just want to say that we need help, though, supporting these local and all the partners that are trying to make this happen so that we can keep fossil fuels in the ground and turn what's happening here and bringing those sustainable options around. We need help to get that done, financial help and technical help. And to close it out, I'll just say that, for me, we heard some people up here talk about their kids. You got to keep it, if everybody's got a reason why they want to be part of the solution. For me, I've got a 14-year-old son and an 11-year-old daughter, and they mean the world to me. I want to make sure they've got clean air, clean water, good jobs, equality, all of that. And I don't want to look back in 20 years and wonder if there's something more I could have done to give them a healthy and safe environment. I don't want them to look back at their parents' generation with contempt and say, how did you leave us dirty oceans and dirty rivers and all of this? So, we have an obligation to leave them a better world than what we inherited. And it's going to come down to both the acceleration of the sustainable ideas coming out of here and these leaders in local communities pushing back against the fossil fuel industry. And I hope we can count on people for help on that. Thank you for having me.